not an assumption, but objective truth. But if truth is truly objective, then why does it change depending on who is looking? This question isn't just an internet joke. It has existed for thousands of years, since humans first began to realize a difficult truth. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world through ourselves, through our memories, experiences, emotions, biases, and even fears. Imagine two people standing in front of the same painting. The first grew up in a peaceful childhood with a light and gentle heart. They see serenity and warmth in the painting. The second grew up in an environment full of pressure and insecurity. They see loneliness and a sadness they can't quite name. Same scene, same moment, yet two completely different worlds. We often think of truth as a flawless diamond. No matter who looks, it's the same. But in reality, it's more like a crystal with hundreds of facets. Each person stands in a different spot, seeing only one glimmering face of it. No one sees the whole shape, and no one can claim their view is the entirety. The modern world makes this even more complicated. Social media turns us into judges of every story, from celebrity scandals to global news. Within seconds, we make our verdict. But how many times have you truly had the full truth before hitting comment? And how many times have you been willing to change your view when new information comes in? Ironically, neuroscience has proven our brains don't just record information like a camera. They select, ignore, add, and sometimes even fabricate details to fit the story we already believe. In other words, sometimes we don't see and then believe. We believe first and then see. Buddhism, thousands of years ago, called this illusion, the images and stories the mind constructs, which we mistake for absolute truth. The Buddha taught there are two types of truth: relative truth and ultimate truth. What we argue about every day is usually just fragments of relative truth, always shifting with conditions and with the mind that perceives it. But this isn't just an abstract theory. It touches every corner of life. A marriage breaks not just because of one mistake, but because two people have lived in two different truths for too long. A community divides not just over political differences, but because each side believes they hold the whole truth, and the other is blind. And here, a more important question arises. If everyone sees truth differently, how can we ever truly understand each other? How can we live in harmony in the same world? The answer isn't simple, but it begins with admitting one thing. Maybe we haven't seen it all. Maybe the story isn't complete. And maybe the other person isn't wrong. They're just standing on another side of the crystal. In this journey, we will explore stories, from the ordinary to the famous. Part 1. Whose truth is right? We grow up believing that the truth is singular, clear, obvious, and that if someone doesn't see it the way we do, they must be wrong. Yet life keeps giving us experiences that shake that belief. The same event is told one way by one person and the opposite by another. The same photograph may bring happiness to one viewer, while another senses sorrow. So where, exactly, does the truth lie? Buddhism teaches that people do not see the world only with their eyes, but also through their memories, experiences, and state of mind. Each lens has its own unique color, and the truth we perceive is just one small slice of the whole. But because we place so much trust in the part we see, we often turn it into the only truth, and from there come arguments, judgments, and distance. In this part, we will encounter stories from all over the world. Emily happened to witness a scene she felt was blatantly unjust. A middle-aged man in a long gray coat arguing heatedly with a young man outside a coffee shop. From a distance, she saw the young man trying to avoid him, but the older man kept moving closer, pointing a finger at his face. Moments later, the man swung his arm, apparently shoving the young man back toward the wall. Emily quickly pulled out her phone and recorded the scene. Once home, she posted the video online with the caption, "I can't believe this happened right in the middle of town." Within hours, the clip had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. Comments quickly split into two camps, one outraged. People pointed to every gesture of the older man, the finger jabbing forward, the step into the other's space, the forceful swing of the arm. They claimed these were undeniable signs of aggression. "No matter what happened before, this is wrong," one commenter wrote. Many shared personal stories of being shouted at by strangers in public, the fear and humiliation they felt, and saw the video as living proof of such abuse. In the skeptical camp, the comments took a different turn. One person, claiming to be a friend of the man in the video, wrote, "Some analyzed the footage frame by frame, arguing that the young man had stepped into the older man's personal space first, or perhaps said something that made him lose his temper." By the next day, local journalists were on the case. They identified the two men, David Harris, 54, a retired history teacher, and Liam Ward, 19, a cafe waiter. The story grew more complex when it emerged that before the video was recorded, Liam had spilled coffee on David's coat, and when David reacted, Liam laughed instead of apologizing. This new detail sparked another wave of discussion. Some people changed their stance, saying they now understood why David was upset. Others held their ground. No matter the reason, pushing someone is wrong. A few comments took on a more philosophical tone. We're looking at a tiny slice of the whole picture, then rushing to decide who's right or wrong. From a modern psychology perspective, this divided reaction is no surprise. Humans tend to process information through confirmation bias, the tendency to search for and favor details that match our existing beliefs, experiences, and values. Those who had experienced or witnessed public aggression immediately cast David as the villain. Conversely, those who believed every story has multiple sides slowed down, asked questions, and sought other evidence before judging. From a Buddhist perspective, this is a vivid example of the limits of perception. The Buddha taught about the five aggregates, the components of human experience, in which perception, sana, and consciousness, vaya, are always influenced by past impressions, memories, and biases. When our eyes see and our ears hear, the mind rarely perceives things as they truly are, yatha buddhananadasana, but rather as we imagine them to be. A short video clip can become the entire truth in our minds, even though it is only a fragment of a larger reality. If we are honest with ourselves, we have all, at some point. The two later met, shook hands, and resolved the matter peacefully. Yet online, the debate continued, as if no one really cared that the story was over. This story isn't just about a video or two individuals. It's a mirror reflecting how modern society consumes and processes information, quickly, emotionally, and often without context. In an age where any moment can be recorded, edited, and spread worldwide, the question, whose truth is correct, is becoming harder to answer. Buddhism reminds us that to see clearly, we must learn to let go of haste, practice mindfulness, and recognize when our minds are being pulled toward a part of the story instead of the whole truth. A clip less than a minute long led millions to argue, take sides, and feel intense emotions. This shows that truth is not always a solid, whole object. It can be bent, fragmented, or seen through different lenses. And when each person holds only one fragment, they often mistake it for the entire picture. That is why learning to pause, observe, and admit, maybe I don't know the whole story, is the first step toward overcoming bias and stubbornness in our perception. 1.2 A photo that shook the internet, blue and black, or white and gold. In early 2015, a single photo posted on Tumblr sparked a global debate that no one could have anticipated. The image was simple, a dress hanging in a store, photographed under everyday conditions. But when people looked at it, something astonishing happened. Half of them swore it was blue and black, while the other half insisted it was white and gold. The disagreement was so intense that it broke out of the confines of social media, spilling into newsrooms, living rooms, and even scientific conferences. Caitlin McNeil, a Scottish singer-songwriter, was the first to upload the image after a friend's mother sent it to her, asking for help to settle a family argument. She couldn't have imagined that her post would go viral overnight, reaching millions of people worldwide. Celebrities, athletes, and even politicians joined the debate, passionately defending what they saw as the obvious truth. But how could one photograph, without any Photoshop trickery, create such a stark division? Neuroscientists quickly entered the conversation. The explanation lay not in the dress, but in our brains. Human vision doesn't simply register raw data from the eyes, it interprets it, adjusting for the lighting conditions we believe are present. Some people's brains assumed the photo was taken in daylight and filtered out blue, making the dress appear white and gold. Others assumed it was under artificial shadow and filtered out yellow, revealing blue and black. The debate went far beyond a quirky internet trend. It became a mirror reflecting how our perception of reality is shaped by unconscious assumptions. Two people could stand side by side, looking at the exact same image, yet live in entirely different visual worlds, and both would be convinced they were right. This phenomenon opened up broader conversations about truth in everyday life. If we can't even agree on the color of a dress, how can we be certain that we're seeing political events, historical facts, or personal relationships as they really are? Scientists pointed out that the brain is constantly constructing reality, filling in gaps with past experiences, cultural influences, and even emotional states. In the end, the physical dress was confirmed to be blue and black. But for many, the answer didn't matter anymore. The photo had become a timeless reminder that what we see is not necessarily what is, and that the certainty we feel about our own perception may be nothing more than the brain's best guess. Some people laughed off the whole thing as internet fun. Others were unsettled, realizing how fragile and subjective their reality might be. Either way, the dress became an unlikely teacher, showing us that truth is not always a fixed point, but a spectrum filtered through human perception. And somewhere out there, perhaps right now, someone is still shaking their head, insisting, "I don't care what they say, that dress is white and gold." 1.3 Analysis. The brain processes information through its own filters. Buddhism, ultimate truth and conventional truth. In the hustle and bustle of everyday life, each of us is constantly bombarded by a flood of images, sounds, and information. Yet, this filter is shaped by personal experiences, memories, cultural background, and emotions. Two people witnessing the same event may end up with completely different versions of what happened, because their mental filters are not the same. Modern neuroscience has shown that the brain does not passively receive reality, it actively builds it. What we see is not simply light entering our eyes, but rather the brain's interpretation of electrical signals based on prior experiences. This explains why a photograph can be blue-black to one person and white-gold to another. Their brains are not lying. They are simply creating different realities from the same input. Buddhism has long recognized this nature of perception. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught that what we perceive is shaped by our mind. The world we see is not the ultimate reality, but a projection shaped by our own mental formations. In Buddhist philosophy, there is a distinction between conventional truth, tucita, and ultimate truth, chanda. Conventional truth refers to the reality experienced through our senses, names, shapes, concepts, and distinctions that help us navigate daily life. They are simply practical agreements that allow society to function. However, they are relative, changing according to culture, context, and individual perspective. Ultimate truth, on the other hand. From the standpoint of ultimate truth, a table is not truly a table. It is wood, which is sunlight, which is rain, which is earth, all coming together in a certain form for a certain period before changing again. It is the recognition that the boundaries we draw are mental constructs, not the essence of reality. This is why two people can quarrel endlessly over who is right, when in reality, they are each experiencing a different slice of the same reality. The Buddha taught that wisdom comes when we can hold both truths simultaneously, operating within the conventions of daily life while seeing them as provisional and not absolute. From this perspective, the different colors of the same dress or the contradictory interpretations of the same event are no longer problems to be solved, but reminders that our perceptions are limited. When we train our minds through mindfulness and meditation, we begin to notice how our filters work. We see how thoughts, emotions, and judgments arise and color our perception. Over time, we gain the freedom to respond more wisely rather than react automatically. We begin to live with more humility, aware that what we see is not the whole truth, and that the ultimate truth lies beyond all appearances. In this way, the teaching of conventional truth and ultimate truth is not an abstract philosophy, but a practical guide for living peacefully in a diverse, complex world. It allows us to step back from the urge to prove ourselves right, and instead, to explore reality with curiosity and compassion. for when we understand that each mind has its own filter. Part 2. The lens each person wears. Each of us looks at the world through an invisible lens, a collection of experiences, memories, beliefs, and even the wounds etched into our minds. This lens not only shapes the way we see things, but also influences how we feel, judge, and respond. Some people wear rose-colored glasses, seeing life as always sweet. Others wear gray ones. Through mindful observation, we gradually realize that the world does not exist solely as we perceive it, but reflects countless other perspectives. When we become aware of the lens we're wearing, one childhood, but two completely different memories. On a rainy autumn afternoon in Edinburgh, two brothers, Jonathan and Michael, sat together in the small living room of their childhood home. They had come to help sort through their late father's belongings, but soon, memories began to flow like an unstoppable stream. Jonathan picked up an old, slightly faded photograph. It showed the two of them standing in front of a small fishing boat, smiling awkwardly, with their father's arm around their shoulders. The picture was taken at Portobello Beach, sometime in the late 1990s. Jonathan's eyes lit up. "I remember that day so well," he said, his voice warm with nostalgia. "Dad took us fishing early in the morning. The water was calm." His voice slow, almost hesitant. "Because I remember it completely differently. That day was awful. It was freezing, the waves were rough. And Dad yelled at me the whole time because I dropped the bait box into the water. I couldn't wait for it to be over." The room fell silent for a moment. Two brothers, looking at the same photograph, recalling the same day, but with memories so utterly at odds that they could have been from two entirely different worlds. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, genuinely puzzled. "You can't be serious." "I've always remembered that as one of the best days of our childhood." Michael shook his head. "And I've always remembered it as one of the worst." This wasn't the only memory where their recollections clashed. As the afternoon went on, more shared childhood moments were brought up, only to reveal starkly different versions. The time their family moved to a new house, Jonathan remembered the excitement of exploring a bigger backyard, while Michael recalled feeling lost, missing his old friends. The Christmas when they got a puppy, Jonathan swore it was a joyous day, while Michael remembered being terrified of the dog's sudden barking. How could two people who grew up in the same home, as the elder brother, always felt a strong bond with their father? He was often praised, given responsibilities, and treated as the capable one. His memories naturally leaned toward the positive. Michael, on the other hand, carried the burden of being compared to his older sibling. It was the same event, but filtered through two emotional realities, shaped by years of subtle differences in experience, personality, and perception. In Buddhism, there's a recognition of this subjective nature of reality. The same truth can look entirely different depending on the mind that perceives it. Just like two people can sit under the same sky, one sees a sunset of brilliant colors, while the other notices only the encroaching darkness within the worlds of their own memories. What mattered more was understanding how these different lenses had shaped them and how empathy could bridge the gap between those worlds. That day, as they packed away their father's belongings, the brothers quietly agreed on one thing. They may never remember their past the same way, but they could choose to create better, shared memories from here on out. 2.2 The Invisible Gorilla, the things we miss right before our eyes. In the mid-1990s, on the campus of Harvard University, two psychology researchers recorded a short video of two teams passing basketballs, one team dressed in white shirts, the other in black shirts. The instructions to the participants were clear. Watch the video and count how many times the white team passes the ball. The task sounded easy. The participants leaned forward, concentrating intensely on every pass. Pass 1. Pass 2. A bounce pass. A chest pass. Numbers tallied quickly in their heads. But midway through the clip, something completely unexpected happened. The gorilla was there for nearly 9 seconds, long enough that, if asked, anyone would think it impossible to miss. Yet, when the video ended and the researchers asked, "Did you notice anything unusual?" about half of the participants looked puzzled and replied, "No," when shown the clip again, this time without the counting task. Those same people were shocked. How could I not have seen that? They weren't pretending. Their brains had truly filtered the gorilla out of conscious awareness. This phenomenon was later named inattentional blindness, the inability to perceive something fully visible because our attention is focused elsewhere. In other words, the eyes see, but the mind decides what's worth noticing. The experiment became famous, replicated countless times around the world, and now serves as a cornerstone in psychology lectures. It works like a selective spotlight, illuminating certain details while leaving others in the dark. If the spotlight is fixed on counting basketball passes, the brain may simply ignore a gorilla thumping its chest right in the middle of the action. Outside the lab, this limitation plays out daily. A driver, focusing intently on the traffic light ahead, might fail to notice a pedestrian stepping onto the crosswalk. A surgeon, concentrating on removing a tumor, might overlook a small but dangerous anomaly in another part of the organ. Even in relationships, we can be so focused on proving our own point that we fail to see the obvious emotions on the other person's face. Psychologists explain that attention is a finite resource. Every moment, our senses are bombarded with far more information than the brain can handle. So it filters, prioritizing whatever aligns with our current goals, beliefs, or expectations, much like wearing a pair of tinted glasses that only let certain colors through. The downside is that we can miss critical truths simply because they don't fit our mental filter, shaped by our mental conditioning, desires, and ignorance. The Buddha likened it to looking at the moon's reflection in a pond. We mistake the rippling image for reality, forgetting that the true moon is far above. Just as the participants in the gorilla experiment could swear there was no gorilla because they didn't see it, we can live entire lives overlooking reality because our mind spotlight is fixed elsewhere. The Buddhist concepts of chanda, ultimate truth, and tucida, conventional truth, shed light here. The ultimate truth is reality as it is, free from the distortions of perception and thought. The conventional truth is the filtered, relative version we experience day to day, shaped by our focus, our cultural conditioning, and our personal biases. The gorilla experiment is a perfect modern metaphor for this gap. The gorilla was always their ultimate truth, but it didn't exist in the participants' awareness, conventional truth. The danger is that we often assume our conventional truth is complete. When someone disagrees with us, we think they are wrong, without considering that both perspectives might simply be different slices of reality. Just like two people watching the same basketball game might notice different details. Two people living through the same event may come away with vastly different truths. This is why the gorilla experiment has resonated so deeply beyond academia. It's a mirror for our daily lives. How often do we miss the gorilla in conversations, in our judgments, in our understanding of others? How often do we cling to the belief that our version of events is the only correct one, blind to the fact that we may have filtered out something essential? In Buddhist practice, mindfulness is the tool to widen that spotlight. Instead of locking our focus on one narrow task or narrative, we learn to hold awareness open, to notice not just the basketball passes, but also the unexpected visitor in the frame. And as long as we live without questioning our mental filters, we will continue to walk past truths that stand right in front of us, waving for our attention. Buddhism invites us to remove those tinted glasses, to turn our gaze toward the ultimate truth, and to remember that what we don't see can matter just as much, sometimes even more, than what we do. 2.3 Life experience as a colored lens. When the mind is pure, the world is pure. Each of us is born like a blank sheet of paper. Over time, however, experiences, memories, emotions, and the lessons we accumulate gradually coat that paper with different shades. They become like a lens we wear before our eyes, preventing us from seeing the world in its pure, unfiltered form, and instead coloring everything through the tint of what we've lived through. Someone who has enjoyed a warm and loving childhood may wear a lens of soft, gentle hues. They tend to view life with trust, to forgive easily, and to smile readily. In contrast, someone who has endured loss, betrayal, or violence may carry a lens of gray, even darkness. It is an active participant in the cyclical cause and effect between ourselves and the world. In Buddhism, the phrase, "when the mind is pure, the world is pure," perfectly captures this principle. When the mind settles, no longer clouded by anger, greed, or ignorance, the lens before our eyes becomes clearer. We perceive people and events with wisdom and compassion. At such moments, although the external world remains essentially the same, our internal experience transforms entirely. A criticism can be seen as an opportunity to learn. A loss can be seen as a chance to let go. In reality, no one can live entirely free of the colors of experience. But what we can do is recognize those colors, understand them, and remember that they are not the real world, but the world through my lens. When we see this clearly, we gain the ability to adjust our lens. If it is too cloudy, we can clean it. If it is too dark, we can allow more light to pass through. This is why spiritual teachers so often urge their students to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is like cleaning the lens daily. Our lens reflects reality more faithfully. The image of the colored lens also explains why two people can experience the same event in completely different ways. When it rains, instead of trying to change other people or every circumstance, many of which are beyond our control, we can start by changing the color of our lens. That means altering the way we react, the way we think, the way we interpret events. When the mind relaxes, judges less, and softens, the lens becomes lighter, and the outside world feels less harsh. When the mind is pure, the world is pure, does not mean the world turns into a place without suffering. It speaks of our subjective experience. When the mind is clear, suffering no longer feels unbearable, and people no longer appear as enemies. We can face difficulties with equanimity, and sometimes even with gratitude, because they teach us something valuable. In this way, the path of practice is: you cannot choose the color of the lens you were given at birth, but you can absolutely choose the color of the lens you will wear for the rest of your life. And that choice, deep down, is the choice of the life you will live. Part 3. Pieces of the Truth. There are truths that never reveal themselves all at once. They are like a vast jigsaw puzzle. Each piece gained through experience, discovered by chance, or sometimes simply falling into our hands after many years. Some pieces shine brightly, making our hearts leap with joy, each with his own pride and certainty about how the world worked. They had heard countless tales of a strange, majestic creature called an elephant, but none had ever touched one. One summer morning, news spread through the market square that a merchant from a faraway land had brought such a creature into town. The 6 blind men, eager to confirm their own notions, asked to be led to the animal. The first man reached out and felt the elephant's side. So the elephant is like a solid wall, wide and unmovable, he declared confidently. The second man grasped the tusk. You are wrong, he said firmly. The elephant is like a smooth, curved spear, strong and sharp. The third man, holding the trunk, laughed at them both. The sixth man grabbed the tail and said with finality, You're all mistaken. The elephant is like a rope, thin, rough, and dangling. They began to argue, each defending his own truth, raising their voices until the merchant, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Each of you is correct, in part, but none of you has the whole picture. And literature interprets the object through the lens of their expertise. One insists it's a ceremonial tool, another believes it's a weapon, a third is convinced it's a musical instrument. Each argument is backed by logic, evidence, and passion. Yet, when the artifact is finally revealed in its entirety, they discover it's a part of something far more complex, a mechanism whose purpose none could have deduced alone. Both stories point to the same moral: we often grasp only fragments of reality. Our personal experiences, education, and beliefs are like small windows. What we see through them feels complete, but the full landscape lies beyond our view. The truth we hold so tightly may be accurate in its details, but dangerously incomplete in its scope. In life, we may cling to our piece of the elephant and dismiss all other perspectives. We judge, we argue, we defend what we know, unaware that we are simply describing the world from where we stand. But wisdom lies in humility, the willingness to acknowledge that our vision is limited, that others may hold pieces of the puzzle we do not. The Buddhist teaching resonates here. Reality is interdependent and multifaceted. The clearer our mind, the more we see the connections between things. A restless, clouded mind will mistake fragments for the whole. A calm, open mind will recognize patterns and embrace the full picture. And so, whether we are blind men feeling an elephant or scholars debating over an artifact, the invitation remains the same: to listen, to seek, and to weave the fragments together, not in the hope of finding a single, fixed truth, but to live with a deeper, more compassionate understanding of the vast and intricate reality we share. 3. To the case that took 20 years to unravel, when a single new piece changed the truth. It was a rainy evening in Manchester in the autumn of 1999 when the police arrested Thomas Bradley. The charge was as heavy as the gray clouds hanging over the city: murder. The victim, a young bookstore owner named Michael Harris, was found dead in his shop, and a neighbor reported hearing an argument between the two just days before. The trial was swift. The prosecution painted Thomas as a man consumed by jealousy over a business dispute, and the defense, though insistent on his innocence, could not explain away the damning evidence. Within months, Thomas was sentenced to life in prison. His wife left him. His daughter grew up avoiding his name, and his friends slowly disappeared. All that remained was his steadfast claim: "I did not do it." 2 decades passed. In those years, forensic science leaped forward, new technologies emerged, and the legal system began reopening certain old cases. A nonprofit organization dedicated to wrongful convictions decided to review Thomas's file. The lawyer assigned to his case, Amelia Price, was young but relentless. She sifted through old police reports, photographs, and court transcripts, looking for anything that had been overlooked. What caught her attention was not in the official evidence, but in a side note. A shop inventory list that showed the book with Thomas's fingerprints had been purchased 3 days before the murder. That meant his fingerprints could have been left during a legitimate visit. More importantly, Amelia discovered that the witness who claimed to have seen Thomas that night had a history of mental health issues and had once retracted his statement, something the court had never been told. Using modern AI image enhancement, the footage now revealed a man in a dark coat leaving the bookstore minutes before the time of death, a man who was not Thomas Bradley. The shape of the man's face and his distinct limp matched another suspect who, ironically, had been questioned briefly in 1999 but released due to lack of evidence. With this new piece in place, the entire narrative shifted. The prosecutor who had once stood firmly against Thomas now admitted in court, "Had we known then what we know now, Mr. Bradley would never have been convicted, and the bond they had lost could not be rebuilt overnight. His youth was gone, his career destroyed, and the world outside had changed beyond recognition." Yet Thomas said something remarkable during a televised interview. For 2 decades, the truth was like a puzzle missing one piece. People made up the rest of the picture with what they thought they saw. And I learned, sometimes the wrong picture can last a lifetime, until the right piece is found. The story of Thomas Bradley is a haunting reminder that reality is often incomplete, and that one missing detail can distort the entire truth. In the end, it is not just about justice in the courtroom, but about how we, in our everyday lives, should be careful before passing judgment, because we might only be holding a fraction of the whole picture. 3. Analysis. Emptiness. All phenomena arise from conditions. The trap of confirmation bias. In Buddhist philosophy, the concept of emptiness, sunyata, does not mean nothingness, nor does it deny the existence of phenomena. Rather, it points out that everything we see, hear, and feel is the product of countless interconnected conditions. Nothing exists independently. The flower would not exist in the way we perceive it. When the Buddha taught, all dharmas arise from causes and conditions, he emphasized that no phenomenon has an unchanging, eternal essence. This is why clinging to fixed views or rigidly believing in one absolute truth is a cause of suffering. Our minds often want to find a solid foundation, a certainty to cling to. But the truth is that everything is impermanent and dependent, and thus cannot be completely grasped. This principle becomes especially important when we talk about confirmation bias, a psychological tendency in which we selectively search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms our existing beliefs, while ignoring or rejecting any evidence to the contrary. When we fall into this trap, we are no longer seeing reality as it is, but only as we want it to be. It is like looking at the world through a colored glass. Our view is inevitably tinted, but we often mistake it for the true color of reality. For example, if someone believes that a certain ethnic group is dishonest, they will tend to notice only the news stories or anecdotes that confirm this prejudice, while ignoring thousands of examples that contradict it. Over time, this one-sided observation becomes a self-reinforcing loop, giving them the illusion of having solid evidence, while in fact their perspective is incomplete and distorted. Buddhist teachings on emptiness provide a direct antidote to this bias. Don't be fooled by the form. Look deeply into the causes and conditions. This means that instead of clinging to the appearance of things, we should look at the web of interconnections that give rise to them. When we do this, we can see why different people perceive the same event in completely different ways. A quarrel in the street may be interpreted as a fight by one person, a misunderstanding by another, and a tragedy by a third, depending on their background and emotions at the time. We cannot cling to them absolutely. And because they are empty, they are also free to change, to transform, to be seen in new ways. This freedom is what liberates us from the prison of confirmation bias and other mental traps. In the end, both science and Buddhism point toward the same caution: be aware of your lens. Scientists warn against bias in data interpretation. The Buddha warns against clinging to views. Both remind us that reality is far more vast and complex than any single perspective can contain. And in that humility, in that openness, we find the possibility of wisdom. Part 4. Prejudice, the chains of the mind. There are walls that are not built of bricks and stone, yet they stand firmer than any fortress. These are the invisible walls within the mind. Prejudice not only distorts the truth, but also suffocates our ability to see the world with clear eyes. It is like a pair of tinted glasses we have worn since childhood, coloring every person, event, and object with the shades of our past experiences, fears, or deeply rooted beliefs. The frightening part is that we rarely realize we are chained by prejudice. We keep believing we are right, and anything that does not fit that belief is either rejected or reshaped to fit the framework we have already set. In today's complex world, prejudice not only divides communities but also causes individuals to miss the chance to truly understand and love one another. But like any chain, prejudice can be undone. All it takes is the courage to question our own thoughts, to step beyond our comfort zones, and to learn to listen with an open heart. Because sometimes, true freedom is not about breaking the barriers outside of us. It is about freeing our own minds from these invisible chains. 4.1 The story. A teacher's life turned upside down by a whisper. The city of Brighton was always alive with the laughter of children spilling out of schools in the late afternoon. But for Emma Rowland, a literature teacher at Westwood High, those sounds had begun to fade into a distant echo. She had been a teacher for more than 15 years, known for her kindness, patience, and the way she could make Shakespeare feel like a personal conversation. Her students adored her, and many parents saw her as a second mother to their children. Until one afternoon in early autumn, when everything changed. It began with a single whisper in the corridor. No one knew exactly who started it. Some said it came from a group of parents chatting in the school parking lot. Others believed it began in the noisy cafeteria. But by the end of that day, the story had already morphed into something sinister, a claim that Emma had acted inappropriately toward a student. No details, no evidence, just a vague, poisonous rumor that spread with alarming speed. In the modern age, a whisper can travel faster than the truth. By the next morning, stunned and bewildered, was called into the principal's office. The tone was formal, the language careful. "We're placing you on temporary leave while we investigate," they said. But every word she imagined saying seemed like it would only fuel the fire. The investigation dragged on for weeks. Her absence from the classroom became another talking point online. Former students scrolled through old photos with her, speculating. Parents whispered in supermarket aisles. The rumor about Emma revealed more about the listeners than about the accused, showing how quickly we cling to a narrative that fits our own assumptions. And like all attachments, it blinds us to reality. Emma eventually returned to teaching, though not at Westwood High. She chose a school in another district, far from the whispers. Her voice in the classroom was softer now, but perhaps deeper, marked by a lived understanding that kindness is not enough to shield one from harm. and that the only true freedom comes from seeing beyond the illusions others project. Because in the end, a rumor is nothing more than a shadow. And like all shadows, it disappears when the light of truth is allowed to shine. 4. 2. The experiment that proved a name can change everything. In 2003, half bore names commonly perceived as white American, such as Emily Walsh or Greg Baker. The other half carried names perceived as African American, such as Lakeisha Washington or Jamal Jones. All qualifications, experiences, and contact details were identical. Only the names were different. The results were stark and disturbing. Resumes with white-sounding names received 50% more callback invitations for interviews than those with African-American-sounding names. In other words, Emily and Greg would need to send out 10 resumes to get the same response Lakeisha and Jamal would get after sending 15. The study laid bare a simple but painful truth. In the job market, before your skills are considered, your name might already be working for or against you. This phenomenon is a manifestation of unconscious bias. No recruiter would publicly admit to rejecting candidates because of their name, yet the patterns showed otherwise. The names triggered deep-seated assumptions about race, socioeconomic background. Resumes with ethnic names were less likely to receive callbacks compared to identical ones with white British names. Across cultures, the phenomenon repeated, showing that the human mind, if left unexamined, quickly jumps to judgments without evidence. From a Buddhist perspective, this is a textbook example of vo min, ignorance, shaping our actions without us realizing it. The recruiter thinks they are making a rational decision based solely on merit, but in truth, their perception is filtered through years of conditioning, cultural messages, and stored impressions, vasana. This is the chain of the mind that binds us, preconceived notions that run silently in the background, influencing choices we believe are free. And yet, these biases are not immutable. The first step is awareness. The more we see how our minds leap to conclusions based on superficial cues, the more we can slow down, pause, and truly evaluate people for who they are, not who we imagine them to be. In the Buddhist path, mindfulness serves exactly this purpose: to shine light into the hidden corners of the mind where habits and prejudices live. Imagine a hiring process in which names, genders, and ages are concealed until after an initial screening. Some companies have adopted this blind recruitment method, and the results are telling. More diverse hires, broader talent pools, and reduced turnover. When the label is removed, the content has a chance to speak for itself. The experiment by MIT and the University of Chicago is more than a statistic, it's a mirror. It shows us that the mind clings to labels and stories, even when they are unfounded. Only by seeing this clearly can we begin to dismantle the invisible walls that keep us from meeting others as they truly are. If a name alone can tilt the scales so drastically, what other silent judgments might we be making each day about colleagues, strangers, or even loved ones, without ever realizing it? And how many opportunities for true connection have we lost because of them? 4.3 Analysis: Ignorance and Attachment, Cognitive Dissonance. From the moment we are born, humans do not always perceive the world clearly and objectively. In reality, most of the time, we are caught in the web of ignorance, avidya. One of the root causes that prevent the mind from escaping the cycle of suffering. Ignorance is the state of not correctly understanding the true nature of things, events, even when confronted with contradictory evidence. From a modern scientific perspective, this phenomenon can be explained by the concept of cognitive dissonance. They often protect their original beliefs by denying, distorting, or ignoring the new information. For example, a person who believes they are always right and fair will find it very difficult to accept being pointed out for mistakes or wrongful behavior. They may justify themselves, blame others, or avoid confrontation to protect their self-image. This is a sign of attachment, while ignorance keeps them from seeing the whole truth clearly. Ignorance and attachment are two sides of the same coin, forming strong chains that bind the mind to limited cognitive patterns. This is also why humans easily fall into prejudice, discrimination, hostility, or conflict with others. When we cannot let go of the ego and fixed perspectives, the suffering that arises from these will be hard to liberate. Buddhism teaches that to overcome ignorance, cognitive dissonance in psychology can also be seen as an opportunity for cognitive growth. When we recognize the contradictions in our thinking and behavior, if we have the courage to face the truth instead of avoiding it, we gradually break the chains of ignorance. This is the first step on the path of personal transformation, just as the Buddha taught. Know yourself and know others, and you will win every battle. In reality, no one can completely avoid ignorance and attachment, as they are natural parts of the human mind. But each day we can choose to nurture awareness so as not to be swept away by deluded thoughts. Then, we begin to realize that not everything must be right or wrong absolutely. Because when individuals awaken, the community gradually becomes wiser. Thus, ignorance and attachment are not only internal barriers, but also deep causes of social conflicts, prejudice, and discord. Learning to recognize, face, and gradually let go of them is the most practical path to liberate oneself and build a society full of understanding and compassion. We can imagine the mind as a pond. Ignorance and attachment are particles of dust that muddy the water. When we diligently cultivate mindfulness and practice, we clean the pond, and the water becomes clearer. When the water is clear, unfiltered by colored glasses or biased lenses. Therefore, observing one's own mind, understanding how ignorance and attachment operate, and practicing letting go step by step, is the core of the journey toward awakening and peace. This is not an abstract theory, but a practical lesson, moment by moment, whenever we face prejudices, inner conflicts, or realize our own stubborn ego. It is precisely in these moments, if we maintain awareness without fleeing or resisting, ignorance will gradually dissolve, leaving space for wisdom and compassion to grow. And that is the true beginning of freedom, not from the outside world, but from within ourselves. Part 5. Seeing with the Heart. In life, there are moments when reason alone is not enough to explain everything, and the truth seems obscured by layers of analysis, judgment, or prejudice. At those times, seeing with the heart, through empathy, compassion, and understanding, becomes the key to unlocking a deeper connection between human beings. The heart is not merely the seat of emotions, but also the realm of kindness and sincerity, where truth is perceived through a warm and profoundly humane light. In this part, we will explore stories that demonstrate the power of viewing the world with the heart, how it helps us overcome barriers of perception, dissolve biases, and find true empathy. By learning to open our hearts wider, we not only understand others better, but also gain a deeper understanding of ourselves than ever before. 5.1 When Enemies Become Brothers. The reunion story of an American and Vietnamese veteran. In 2018, during a peace event held in San Francisco, two men, whom few would have expected to sit together and share stories, met. And their story touched the hearts of millions around the world. One was John Miller, a 70-year-old American veteran who had fought in the Vietnam War. The other was Nguyen Van Hong, a 68-year-old Vietnamese veteran who had directly participated in fierce battles during the war. They stood side by side on stage, not as enemies, but as close friends. John recalled memories of his days in the jungles of South Vietnam, the tension, the fear at every strange sound, and the loss of comrades. His story was not only about war memories, but also the lingering pain he had carried for decades. He admitted the anger and resentment he once held, but also shared his journey toward finding peace. When Van Hung listened quietly, Hung recounted the first time he read a teaching of the Buddha. Forgiveness does not change the past, but it changes the future. The meeting became emotional when the two men shook hands and embraced on stage. They spoke about forgiveness, not only toward each other, but also toward themselves. To free themselves from the chains of the past, they shared the importance of seeing people not as enemies or allies in war, but through the heart and character of each person. John and Hung's story became a symbol of the power of compassion and understanding. It showed that despite deep differences and long-lasting wounds, people can find reconciliation if they choose to see the truth with an open heart instead of prejudice and hatred. They did not erase the past, but transformed it into a lesson to build a more peaceful future. In today's society, where conflicts and disagreements can fracture relationships, This story serves as a reminder that forgiveness and kindness are not just acts of the strong, but also a path to liberate oneself from invisible chains of the soul. Above all, the story of these two veterans helps us realize an important truth. Reality is not just what happened, but also how we choose to perceive, feel, and respond to it with an open heart. When the heart opens, barriers thin, and truth becomes multifaceted, rich in emotion, and full of hope. 5.2 When hatred is overcome. Two feuding families unite to save a child. In a small town along the banks of the Thames River in England, two families had lived side by side for generations. Frequent arguments echoed through the neighborhood, creating tension and causing outsiders to avoid the area whenever disagreements flared. However, fate brought about an unexpected event. The 8-year-old son of the Mitchell family, Oliver, became lost and fell into a deep part of the river while playing with friends. At that moment, members of the Harper family, including Thomas Harper and his daughter Charlotte, who were gardening nearby, were the first to notice. In that decisive moment, all differences seemed to be set aside. The cooperation between the two families proved indispensable in saving Oliver's life. After Oliver recovered from the critical condition, news of the event quickly spread throughout the community. People were surprised and moved to see two families, once bitter enemies, overcoming their long-standing grudges to work together to save a life. The harsh rivalry was suddenly replaced with heartfelt thanks, genuine handshakes, and mutual understanding. Although not all conflicts were immediately resolved, the event marked an important turning point. The two families began to have more open conversations, sharing old stories to better understand the root causes of their hatred and realizing that many disputes stemmed from unresolved misunderstandings. The story of the Mitchell and Harper families is not only a vivid testament to the power of compassion and forgiveness, but also shows that the human heart, even if wounded or hardened, still has the capacity to change and connect. In the toughest circumstances, the light of empathy and cooperation can still shine brightly, creating small miracles in everyday life. Buddhism teaches that love and compassion are the medicine that heals all wounds of the soul. When we look at others through the eyes of the heart, we no longer see enemies, only fellow human beings on a shared journey toward happiness and peace. This experience helped both families learn a valuable lesson. Hatred is the chain that binds the mind, while love is the key to liberation. The story also reminds us that sometimes in life, all it takes is a courageous moment to open our hearts, to reassess old prejudices, to change the entire narrative. And perhaps it is in these moments that the profound truth about people and the world truly reveals itself. 5.3 Compassion and Wisdom. The harmony of spirituality and science, empathy and psychology. Compassion and wisdom are foundational qualities in Buddhist tradition, but they extend beyond spirituality, capturing significant interest in modern science, especially psychology, through the concept of empathy. Compassion is not merely an emotional state. It is an active intention to alleviate the suffering of others. Wisdom refers to the ability to recognize the true nature of things, events, and people, reduce conflicts, and foster supportive environments. Scientific research shows that empathy is closely linked to activities in brain regions such as the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting calmness and tolerance. Especially, mindfulness practice, rooted in Buddhism, has been proven to enhance empathy, helping individuals regulate emotions and improve self-awareness and awareness of others. Compassion is not an easy response when facing people with differing or even hostile viewpoints. It demands patience, tolerance, and deep understanding that every person has their own reasons, stories, and wounds. With wisdom, we comprehend that their actions or words do not always stem from their true nature, but are often influenced by ignorance, fear, and suffering. This explains why in stories involving multiple perspectives and prejudice, we cannot rely solely on emotions or superficial intuition, but need to examine them with wisdom. Seeing the complexity of human psychology reduces judgment and anger, widening our capacity for love. Thus, wisdom becomes the light that prevents compassion from becoming blind, but rather manifests as clear-sighted action. Another crucial aspect is deep listening, an essential part of empathy. Listening means not only hearing words, but also receiving emotions, concerns, and nonverbal cues. This act expresses respect and acknowledges the value of others, building bridges between differing viewpoints. In daily life, applying compassion, wisdom, and empathy helps us face difficult situations with kindness and insight. For example, during a heated debate, if we pause to recognize the other's feelings and ask, what is causing their pain or fear, we stop striving to win at all costs and move toward understanding and sharing. This shift eases tension and opens dialogue. Buddhism also emphasizes that compassion should be directed inward as well. When we understand and forgive our own faults and mistakes, our hearts free themselves from cycles of suffering and anger. This foundation allows compassion for others to become genuine and lasting. In summary, compassion, wisdom, and empathy form a trio of strengths that help humans perceive multiple dimensions of truth, overcome prejudice, and build sincere relationships. In today's increasingly complex and diverse world, not an assumption, but objective truth. But if truth is truly objective, then why does it change depending on who is looking? This question isn't just an internet joke. It has existed for thousands of years, since humans first began to realize a difficult truth. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world through ourselves, through our memories, experiences, emotions, biases, and even fears. Imagine two people standing in front of the same painting. The first grew up in a peaceful childhood, with a light and gentle heart. They see serenity and warmth in the painting. The second grew up in an environment full of pressure and insecurity. They see loneliness and a sadness they can't quite name. Same scene, same moment, yet two completely different worlds. We often think of truth as a flawless diamond. No matter who looks, it's the same. But in reality, it's more like a crystal with hundreds of facets. Each person stands in a different spot, seeing only one glimmering face of it. No one sees the whole shape, and no one can claim their view is the entirety.